Boa noite para todo mundo que está chegando. Tem bastante gente entrando na sala aqui. Acho que tem alguma chance de lotar já já. Queria pedir, antes da gente começar, para todo mundo que está chegando, por favor, aí na parte de perguntas, dá um oi para a gente e diz de onde você está assistindo esse webinar, pode ser? E 2 minutinhos a gente começa. Tem gente de São Paulo, Carolina de São Paulo, boa noite. Fernanda também tem de São Paulo, Michele, Jaime, Grande Willerson, aí em Sorocaba, a Bianca em São Paulo, Fabiana, Camila, Cristina, o Thales lá em Brasília, boa noite, Francine do Rio, o Fernando em Salvador, o Charles em São Paulo, gente de tudo que é lugar, legal. André, Álvaro, Érica, Luciana de Curitiba, Carolina de Presidente Prudente, Gabriele Teco, boa noite, querida, que está aqui em São Paulo. Gente, tem bastante gente. Eu vou até agora ver quais outras cidades a gente tem. José Adolfo em Brasília. Deixa eu ver quem mais. Ana Paula, Belém do Pará. Hugo em Recife. A Natália em Cambé, interior do Paraná. Fabiana em Barueri. Vinhedo, interior de São Paulo, em peso aqui. Londrina, Paraná. Liane, que legal. Raíssa, querida, em Fortaleza, quanto tempo. Vamos te ver aqui. Bruna também, olha que legal, quanta gente bacana aqui. Olha só, Nova Bahia, Sergiana, que legal. Danny, we have people in Hawaii.
Amazing. Well, welcome everybody. So
Mayu,
good
de fora, também conhecida como
amazing.
My sister is here as well, Danny.
Right. Well, what's your sister's name?
Mayumi.
Hi, my union. Well, so
A
nice.
Larissa, Recife, Priscila em São Paulo, Raquel em Valinhos, Leda, Nicolas lá em Rio de Fora, a Márcia está no Rio, a Heloísa em Boston. We have people from Boston as well.
Amazing. Wow.
Roberta, Catarina, Israel, boa noite, Carla. Muito legal, gente. Bom, vamos lá. Estamos começando aqui, então, a terceira sessão desse nosso primeiro dia do Festival ALMA. É uma honra enorme aí estar com todos vocês. A gente está em 2 links, né? Então as pessoas já sabem aí que tem a tradução, né? Simultânea, que está no outro link, que receberam por e-mail também. Lá também estão as pessoas fazendo a tradução em Libras, para quem precisar. Eu vou pedir para o nosso time técnico colocar isso no nosso chat aqui, para todo mundo ficar ciente disso. E aí eu vou começar aqui fazendo uma breve introdução do que nos traz aqui hoje. Vamos lá. Ok. Bom, gente, então o Festival ALMA foi criado aí de maneira bastante ágil por um time, por um grupo de pessoas que se mobilizou da maneira mais linda possível, entendendo um pouco do momento que a gente está vivendo. Então, antes de mais nada, queria reconhecer e agradecer a todo mundo que ajudou e que está com a gente nessa, né? Então, é uma correalização entre o Grupo ANGA, o Capitalismo Consciente, o Sistema B Brasil e a HSM. A gente tem a West como Constor fornecendo o GoToWebinar para a gente poder, de fato, ter a melhor tecnologia possível e garantir que seja a experiência mais agradável de todas. A gente tem a Época Negócios, da HSM Management e a MIT Slow Management Review Brasil cobrindo esse evento, que é bastante legal também. e outras organizações parceiras estão dando super apoio para a gente, como a Humanizadas, a Brasil Júnior, o IDBR, né, o Instituto de Identidades do Brasil, e a Vida Simples. Antes de falar qualquer outra coisa, a gente está fazendo com muito carinho, né, todo esse festival, sabendo que muitos de nós, né, estamos com algum conforto em casa, mas que muita gente, né, e talvez a grande maioria de nós não estamos. Então a gente está aí apoiando uma campanha super legal chamada Espalhe Cestas, que está fazendo a coleta de doações para entrega de cestas básicas na região metropolitana de Belo Horizonte. E a gente super pede encarecidamente que quem puder, obviamente, né, ler esse QR Code ou entrar nesse link de poder ajudar, porque cada doação garante uma cesta básica que alimenta uma família por um mês, né? Então, com um clique, com uma doação, você vai dormir hoje sabendo que tem uma família que está pelo menos mais um mês alimentada no meio de tudo isso que a gente está vivendo, né? E aí, antes de chamar o nosso convidado, né, e a gente entrar numa conversa muito legal, a gente resolveu fazer isso aqui, né, da maneira que pudesse ser a mais acessível possível para pessoas que estão em qualquer tipo de situação ou que possam ter qualquer tipo de deficiência. A gente sabe que ainda temos muito que aprender com isso, mas a gente espera aí que possa ser uma experiência legal para todo mundo. E dito isso, a gente muda agora o idioma aqui dessa conversa, passa para o inglês, mas relembrando, temos a tradução simultânea no outro link. Tá bem? Danny, so turning to English, is that all right? Can you hear me?
Yeah, well, thank you, because my Portuguese is non-existent. So, and it's just an absolute pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny. We really appreciate it. And I think before introducing you, I think it's nice to say a little bit about why, not only why this session, but also why this conference. And we know that, and we start to notice that once we got amid all of this crisis and all of the pandemic, not only economy or things that are material change, but also the way we approach things. So we notice that it's very natural in moments like that people start to feel very stressed, to fear a lot of what's coming on and all the anxiety that it can generate in moments like that.
Yes.
And we just want to acknowledge that if by any means you are feeling that, if by any means you are scared or afraid of anything that's going on, I just want to say that you belong to the same group as all of us.
Yes.
And so that among all of the suffer, we can find a lot of opportunity and a lot of creativity to get into. And this is why we at the Younger Group decided to do this session specifically, because we noticed that if we talk about leadership in a deeper sense, we can learn, grow, and thrive, so we can get stronger together. And this is all the context of why we invited Danny. Danny has been coaching us for a year now, and it all started when we read a book that we always recommend, and I'm glad I have that in hands here, which is called Leading Well from Within. We're going to explore a lot about this book. It was definitely the best book I read last year, and it has made some deep impact in my life in many, many ways. And then he has not only coaching us at the Younger Group, but he has also been coaching us personally. He's also the coach of the CEO of Conscious Capitalism International as well. Last year we had the opportunity, I would say the gift, of having Danny with us in Brazil in March for a 2-day workshop with leaders, with Brazilian leaders. And it was so powerful that we start to realize that this sort of content is not just to be lived, but is also a content to be structured, so more people can live into that. And so, Danny, I really and kindly appreciate your time and effort to be here with us today. So, first of all, I would like you to introduce a little bit of yourself, but also begin with a question, which is why conscious leadership is so important for us right now.
Yeah, it's the heart of conscious leadership is, it's really so powerful, but I'm really called, before I start sharing on that, to let me, okay. Yeah, so thank you, Rio, I'm getting quite a big echo on the line.
Yeah, a little bit. Let me try and mute my mic.
Okay. So first of all, well, I'm just wondering if we can resolve that. Let me come back to. I'm so sorry, everybody. Okay. I'm just very mindful that what an extraordinary time this is for all of us. And what's really amazing, and just being down in here with you last year in Brazil, is just the sense of how we're all connected at this time. In many ways, I'm just thinking about everybody that is, so many people are at home, sheltering in place. And with that, comes both opportunity and immense amount of stress. So we're left to our own devices where one of the biggest challenges we can all have is how do we essentially navigate stress and focus on what really matters in the world. The premise of this work, Leading Well from Within, is just that. And that is, if we want to lead well in the world, how do we lead well inside ourselves now? How do we lead? How do we navigate the stress, staying focused on what really matters? And what does conscious leadership have to tell us right now in terms of how we can elevate, how we can all elevate at this time? And so I wanted to just put this in the context of, in a moment I'll get into the neuroscience. When we experience a tremendous amount of stress, it literally can feel like we're losing our minds. It literally can feel like we're losing our minds. And so the act of being able to actually engage with conscious awareness, it enables us then to lead from our higher selves. And for many of you, and there are many of you are from the conscious capitalism community on the call. And if you haven't, if you're not familiar with conscious capitalism, this is a big international movement. Many Brazilian companies are engaged, and the movement was founded by companies like Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Best Buy, Patagonia, Southwest Airlines, and many more. And being with you at Latin American Conscious Capitalism Conference was absolutely the vibrancy of the conscious capitalism movement. There is just, it's extraordinary. And so conscious capitalism leads, really the mission statement of conscious capitalism is we exist to elevate humanity. We exist to elevate humanity. And the challenge that we're having right now with so much suffering, so much stress is how do we all engage as leaders at this time to elevate humanity? And we run off 4 principles. The first principle is higher purpose drives. The second principle then is to make sure that all stakeholders are accounted for. And then the third principle is conscious leadership that drives the fourth principle, which is conscious culture and a thriving environment. And John Mackey, who co-founded movement with Raj Sisodia and many others. Raj Sisodia wrote a book, a beautiful title of a book, which he called Firms of Endearment. And he tracked 28 companies over a 15-year period and found that these companies outperformed other companies by a factor of 10 to 1. So I became insatiably curious about, what this has to reveal in terms of the science and practice of conscious leadership, in terms of why this works and why this is so important right now. So let me just pause right now, just for a brief moment, and just come back here with Rio. Rio, are you there?
I'm here, yeah.
Yeah, so from here, Rio, where would you like to, explore next? What would be most helpful for people?
That's great, Danny. I think having the context of conscious capitalism and acknowledging that this movement is growing faster and it might actually be the only way to go from now on among all of these crises. I think it would be interesting if you could share with us a little bit of what is the role of leadership on that. More specifically, what is the role of conscious leadership on that? And I know that this approach on neuroscience that is very science-backed is very important. And I think in times of challenges in health and in the way we take care of people, being science-backed is very important for us to understand how we really work on that. So yeah. I think it would be amazing. And I know that you have a presentation to share, and I think it would be lovely to see a little bit of that.
With pleasure, Rio. So I'm going to share with you the neuroscience piece, but I want to kind of just share with you at this point in time, really the heart of this work during challenge, the heart of this work, when I use the word heart, I'm actually using that both metaphorically and literally. The heart of the work is self-compassion. So I actually, when I talk about brain science, I see so much compassion in brain science, and here's why. First of all, let me just talk about self-compassion. Self-compassion has three components to it. The first component of self-compassion is mindfulness. That is our ability to step back and observe our thoughts, sensations, and emotions so that we actually break the cycle of rumination. We can disentangle ourselves from the cycle of rumination. The second component of mindfulness, the second component of self-compassion, is the ability to incline towards kindness. So when we notice suffering, oftentimes our suffering also involves ways that we can be very hard on ourselves. We might say things like, what's wrong with me? Why am I not showing up? Why am I not doing better at this time? And we can be very self-critical. So the ability to meet ourselves with kindness offsets that harsh self-criticism. The third dimension of self-compassion is what's called common humanity. It's common humanity. It's this knowing that we're all in this together. And what I love about brain science is, and I hope to be able to show you, if you think to some degree you may be at times when you get very stressed, it feels like you're losing your mind or you're getting very edgy or anxious, I just want to really reassure you, you're not weak, you're not flawed, but this is literally what your brain does under stress. And the other thing is we're connected by our biology. So when we see other people being stressed, it gives us an understanding why. So we can all find greater compassion. So when I look at the biology, there are a number of ways to organize this. There are for this work, there's a wonderful construct called the triune brain. And the triune brain means we don't only have one brain, we literally have three brains in one, and it's an evolutionary model of the brain where our brain develops from the bottom up and the back forward. And so the three components of the triune brain are, first component is over here is the brain stem, known as the reptilian brain. The second component of the triune brain is the next part in evolution, is known as the paleomammalian brain, also known as the limbic system. And then the third part of the triune brain is this piece that wraps over the top. And particularly there's a piece behind that. This is called the neocortex. And there's a part over here behind the forehead that really is the wisest part of the brain. It's the newest part of evolution. And here's what's significant. The brain essentially maps against Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It essentially maps against Maslow's hierarchy of needs to satisfy three main needs why we've thrived as a species. So the brain stem, the most powerful circuits in the brain, focus largely on safety and survival. So all this information comes in through our senses and it goes through the safety circuits first. And if we match for unsafe, we will immediately go into fight and flight responses even before we know we do. So the brain's first premise is not joy or happiness. Your brain's first priority is safety first. Then, next, once we feel safe, we can rise and elevate further in our brain. And this gives rise to this limbic system over here, paleomammalian brain, which has a lot of functions, one of which is pair bonding and nurturing. So this is the ability, this part of our brain gives rise to our capacity for love and belonging, our capacity for social cooperation, and our ability to come together. And then as we rise even further on that platform and we rise into our highest cortical circuits, we elevate to our wisest part of our brain. This is the part of the brain when we're thinking about conscious leadership. This is the part of the brain that engages high performance conscious leadership. This part of the brain integrates all levels below it. So it has a number of important functions. First function is there are connections between the prefrontal cortex and a part in the limbic system here called the amygdala. The amygdala spots danger that then triggers your fight and flight responses. So if we know how to observe danger, we automatically will go into fight and flight. But if we know how to actually observe and activate our prefrontal cortex, we can actually create emotional composure within seconds. This part of the brain, also there's a highway of fibers that run up and radiate from gut intelligence, heart intelligence, that radiates forward in the brain. This part of the brain also gives you the capacity for social awareness and empathy and compassion. So this part of the brain enables you to relate well to others. In addition, this part of the brain is engaged with executive function, our ability to make clear decisions. So engage with vision, strategy, decision-making, so we can achieve results. And then finally, this part of the brain has a very important quality. It's called metacognition. It enables us to step back mindfully to observe the thought stream of our mind and to then pause before we respond. So here's the implication of all of this in this time of incredible stress and need. There are flows that happen in the brain. There are flows that happen in the brain, and the flows are dictated by a formula. And the formula is, what is the relationship of the demands we're experiencing in our life to the resources we have to engage? And when demands exceed resources, we go into a threat response. We really become threatened with stress and self-doubt, and we drive ourselves down into a state of reactivity. We go into the safety frame. Rio?
Yeah, I'm so sorry, but we lost your screen.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see what I can do here. I'm gonna, how would I do that, Rio? And I'm so sorry, everyone. This is one of the things where we're all learning now around the technology. So
maybe presenter again.
Yeah.
Let me see. Okay.
All right. How about, okay, and then I'm going to go back. How about now?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, if you could go like 2 or 3 slides backwards.
Okay.
Okay.
So how about there, right there?
Yeah, I think the ones when you were talking about the areas of the brain.
Okay, so this is in the areas of the brain. Here we go. So, so first of all, this is really. I've lost my cursor now as well. So, so the three areas of the brain. Let me just start again. Thank you. So here are the three areas of the triune brain, and those three areas map against Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Okay, so can you see that, Ria, and everybody?
Yeah, it's perfect now.
Okay, great. And so what I was saying is when demands, and what I was saying early on over here is the brainstem maps into safety, the limbic system into love and belonging, and the higher cortical circuits, the place of high performance conscious leadership, gives us the capacity for significance. So literally when you're talking about conscious leadership, we're talking about can we elevate and literally lead from a higher self? When we're talking about the mission statement of conscious capitalism, we exist to elevate humanity. That essentially is Maslowian. And we're asking, can we elevate humanity? Can we elevate and lead from a higher self? Now there's a countercurrent that when we experience a situation when we're in a situation, looking at that formula again of demands and resources, when demands outstrip resources, we go into a threat response, going down into a reactive mindset and into our fight, flight, safety responses. And so when you look at the time we're in right now, many of us had a lot of demands, high demands in our life. We already felt sometimes we were strained for resources. Now we've got coronavirus, a moment of high demand. The disease is creating tremendous disorientation, disruption. We're going to our fear-based responses, so we're losing our internal resources, and we're actually at work, we're out of our usual familiar systems, and we're becoming more fragmented, potentially in our relationships. So if ever there was a time that we've tipped, we've gone into kind of our fight and flight responses. And on the one hand, while this is very helpful, very, very helpful in terms of, going into paying attention to safety, particularly when it's around coronavirus infection, already kind of looking at making sure we're taking care of our business and keeping our business in survival mode so that we actually can kind of pay the bills, we can keep, people as best we can employed with compassion. All of that is very, very important. But in fight and flight down here as well, our fight and flight, particularly when we're actually fighting against psychological threats, not just physical threats, psychological threats, like where we're threatened by stress, we can begin to fight for control. And when we're threatened by self-doubt, we can begin to fight to prove self-worth. And that can create immense amount of strain on our relationships as well. It can lead us into a low performance leadership state, a reactive mindset form of leadership, where we can become edgy, irritated, and rather than elevating, we can actually find ourselves in tremendous amount of reactivity in our relationships. I know that I've had moments where I've been more irritated and angry at my wife than I ever have wished I would have been. And it's a function of the demands exceeding the resources. And so here we are in a reactive frame. So the act of conscious leadership is this. Can we understand this physiology? Can we understand this neurobiology and develop the skills and practices for elevation? Can we elevate ourselves? Can we create an internal sense of psychological safety, a greater sense of connected within ourselves, and repivot and refocus on what matters most? To tap into a flow, the first tenet of conscious capitalism is purpose. To tap into a flow of inspiration, within which we can elevate ourselves and then elevate others around us. So part of this foundation is to learn in this moment. What does it mean to take care of ourselves? What does it mean to take care of our loved ones? What does it mean to take care of our colleagues, take care of our clients? And as we do so, we will elevate and become more resilient over time. Without that capacity, particularly over time, over months, if we're on this track within ourselves, literally spending weeks and months going down into safety, we'll end up feeling exhausted, disconnected, and a reduced sense of accomplishment. In those three areas, exhaustion, disconnection, reduced sense of accomplishment, that's essentially the science-based classification of burnout. On the other hand, when we actually can learn to develop these skills of elevation, in this time, we also have the capacity to build great resiliency. So let me pause over here, and where I can go next, Rio, is, I'm happy to share with you all in terms of what does this mean in the way of a leadership and the way we can take this forward. So, Rio, what would serve best? What would serve best right now for us to explore further?
Thank you, Danny. First of all, I think it's very interesting because this is the kind of structure that helps us understand better what is going on within. And I think that's why the title of the book is so interesting in that sense. Before going on, I would just like to say that we are already reading the questions. So you can either write your question in GoToWebinar, if you are in GoToWebinar, or you can write in the comments at the YouTube link. And we have a team that is going to pick up a few of them so we can bring them in the last 15 minutes at the end of the session.
Yeah.
And that being said, Danny, I still remember when you shared with us not only I would say, the hard science approach or the medical science approach of that, but for me, it's very remarkable when you spoke a little bit about what can we do when we are in the reactive cycle and when we feel that we are trapped in stress and self-doubt.
Yeah.
And you know that two things that you said were very remarkable for us on that sense. The first one was when you talked about your relationship with your mother. And I'd like to stress that because many people here are asking a little bit about your background. And I think it would be lovely to hear that. And the other one, of course, which is also on the description of the book, which is mindfulness. So a lot of people talk about mindfulness, but you can approach it in a way that, for me, is very special. So bringing something into the table, and then we can work on that.
Yeah. So, well, thank you for that. And I'll just share there were, some a little bit of background. One is the reason why I'm so invested in this work was I'm an immigrant from South Africa to the US. And when I came to the States as a young person, I really fell apart. I had a very hard time settling in, but I thought when I went to medical school, I was going to actually reconnect with a sense of family. And everything came to a head in my second year of medical school. I really hit the wall where I was overwhelmed with stress and self-doubt. I was very, very reactive. And I didn't even know what I was going through at the time. And I had to go into counseling. And so for me, the work of leading well from within is really how do you learn how to navigate stress and elevate yourself? So that for me is a very, very personal journey. And there were two things that happened. One was I thought I was the only person going through it. So at the young age of 25, I said to my counselor, I'm such a loser, like I'm the only person going through this. And my counselor said, well, don't you know that more than half your class is in counseling right now? And that was a big revelation because many of us suffer in silence. We're in the stream, this pathway, and we're not talking to anybody about it. And so I thought, well, my first experience at the age of 25, not knowing what the heck I was doing, was I said, well, somebody's got to do something and change the culture. And so my first experience of leadership and conscious leadership, but not knowing what I was doing, was I created the medical student network at the University of California, San Francisco, put the entire medical school in support groups to really kind of talk about this idea that if we could learn how to be open and honest with our own vulnerability, we could actually lean in and take better care of ourselves and be open and authentic about that. We can be more compassionate with ourselves and be more compassionate with our patients as well, who are suffering too. So that was my first experience of conscious leadership leading to conscious culture. And I felt so much meaning in that work. And then I learned some more lessons along the way. One was I engaged the conscious capitalism movement. And so this was where I really learned the value of conscious capitalism. I also then wrote one of the early textbooks on how all doctors make medical decisions, which gave me a science-based lens to look at conscious leadership. And then I also became the founding chair of the Academy of Integrative Health and Medicine, which gave me the experience of what it means to actually work in the trenches. It's one thing to actually teach leadership. It's another thing to be a leader. But the lesson that I learned, one of the most profound lessons that I learned, was from my mother. And my mother, she taught me this lesson that was so powerful. Well, so first of all, when we experience reactivity and creativity, we are wired to connect. So we don't go through this in isolation. We don't go through this in isolation because we're wired to connect. Really, if you think about it, leadership is an act of influence. Leadership's an act of influence. And ultimately, because we're wired to connect, we're in one of these cycles over here. We're in one of these cycles. The most common cycle is this cycle here. So when you're involved, when you're feeling reactive and you're in your fight and flight response, triggering fight and flight in somebody else, they're then triggering fight and flight in you. And over here, we're around and around, we're in a cycle of reactivity. We're around and around in a cycle of reactivity. And by the way, when we're reactive and we're triggering the reactivity in others, they're then actually going into kind of creating reactivity in their networks. And so we're actually, this reactivity is socially and emotionally contagious. And really, in a time right now of coronavirus, we're not only talking about physical contagion, but we're also talking about the way we show up as leaders is socially and emotionally contagious as well. And so the question that I had that I didn't have the answer to at the time is, if that's the cycle of reactivity, what's the cycle of creativity? And my mom taught that to me, and she had never been sick a day in her life. And unfortunately, when I went down to visit her, she was sick, and as a physician, internist, her doctor was going on vacation, and I took over a workup and I ordered a CAT scan and found out that she had pancreatic cancer. And it was just crushing to me. And the next call I had to make was I had to call and give my mom her diagnosis. And you know, up until that point in my life, it was really interesting. Up until that point in my mom's life, she was very reactive herself. She was very insecure. And the moment mom was diagnosed, she, instead of actually consuming attention, she started radiating love. She wanted to be close to us. She started radiating love. And she lived 13 months. And there was this, in the last 3 days of her life, the rabbi came by and mom was no longer awake. And she said, he started leading in at the bedside, whispering into ear, and he said, Yvonne, after all these years, what have you learned is the meaning of your life? We didn't think mom was going to be able to answer. And I was sure she was going to be able to answer. She would say something like, to get love. And instead, she opened her eyes and she said, the meaning of my life, and with a clear, bold voice, she said, the meaning of my life is to give love, to give love, to give love. And that was essentially mom's dying words. It was all about giving love. And so I said to a wise friend, I said, you know, my mom moved in her life from being able to get love to a place of to give love. And then my wise friend said, but what if your mom had learned how to receive love in her lifetime? And then it dawned on me that the cycle of creativity is an ability to receive and give love with others. To receive and give love with others, to basically receive others with empathy and understanding and give with authenticity and care. And that also helps us make sense of the beautiful title of Raj Sisodia's book, Terms of Endearment. And what he showed was that companies that actually act with conscious capitalism principles representing firms of endearment outperform others. And here's why. I can tell how successful a company is by asking a very simple question. Does your company or team run on fear or does it run on love? And companies that run on love thrive. And here's why. When we bring back Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if your company is in fear, and this is a very fearful time, so if you have a tremendous amount of reactivity in your company, which is understandable right now, and you're in fight, flight, trigger, and you're in the cycle of reactivity over here, what's happening is we're going down into a place of safety, foregoing love and belonging, and disrupting our circuits of decision-making and performance. And so, of course, we're not performing very, very well. On the other hand, if we're in a cycle of being able to receive and give with others, receive others with empathy and understanding and give with authenticity and care, cultivating a deeper sense of safety, belonging, and significance, we can really rise to deliver on the full purpose and promise of our organization. And so, how do we do this? And one of the things mindfully, where mindfulness comes in, is our ability to step away and rather than elevate, to really step to a place of elevation. So if we see somebody coming at us with their fight and flight responses, instead of going straight into that cycle, we can receive them in a different way by saying something like, this is a difficult moment for you. I wonder, we're not asking what's wrong with that person. We're asking the deeper question, I wonder how that person is suffering. I wonder what's causing that suffering below the reactive responses that's causing them to hurt. And our ability to meet somebody there, to be able to receive them at a deeper level and then give of concern, begins to help us enter the cycle. And so in this world of conscious capitalism, understanding the formula of demands and resources, when demands exceed resources, we cave under threat, and that's what normally happens to people. One of the most profound questions we can ask ourselves is, am I showing up as a demand for this person right now, or am I showing up as a resource for them? And that will change the tone within which we engage, where we can approach somebody with a deeper sense of mindful self-compassion, approaching them with greater openness, kindness, curiosity about what's causing them challenge and how we can best serve, and then anchoring to what best serves next so we can all elevate together. So let me pause there.
Thank you. And it's very interesting to see, and I'll try actually to contextualize because a lot of people are commenting on that. A lot of people started to ask, how do I reverse the cycle? How do I get out of reactivity into creativity? All right. And as you start to bring not only your personal stories, but also this different approach, I'm always amazed by the changes we can see in the way we speak about things. And when we look at what everything is going on right now, And we see that in a higher perspective, this sense of stress and self-doubt might not only be individual, but it's collective. It's all among society right now.
Yes.
Hearing from you how we can reverse the cycle and understand that it really does come from within, I think it's a major gift to all of us.
Yeah.
So I would love if you could like go a little bit deeper into that, because a lot of people at this very moment are feeling it, and they have it right now at the top of their minds, and wondering what are the next steps they can have on that.
Yeah, so let me put this into a practical coaching framework. So when we're talking about coaching, and part of this experience we've gone through together, Ria, with with the team, and all of you as leaders are coaches. We're all coaches, and so the nature of coaching is, first of all, how do we self-coach ourselves to elevation? How do we self-coach ourselves to elevation? And then with this insight, how do we as a coach help others to self-coach themselves to elevation? So you're actually building capacity from the bottom up. So the heart of this work is the ability to engage in effective mindfulness-based inquiry. The nature of this work is, can you optimize your relationship with yourself and others? And where this touches down in terms of, can you optimize your conversation? Can you optimize your internal conversation? And can you optimize your external conversation? So for example, if we're asking questions within our internal dialogue, that inner voice in our mind that's saying things like, and it's automatic oftentimes, when we're under pressure, we ask things like, what if, and every catastrophe that could happen. If only, and the regrets of my past. What's wrong with me and what's wrong with all these other people? Why they're being so difficult? That's really very much a reactive dialogue. So if you can catch it, if you can notice, and mindfulness is the capacity to notice and choose, notice and choose. So if you can notice that internal conversation and then intentionally reframe, reseed, offer new questions into that internal dialogue, saying things like internally, this is a difficult moment. What's it that I'm here to learn? How can I better connect with myself? How can I better connect with others? How can I better connect with my highest source of inspiration, which for many people is the deepest act of faith? How can I best express myself? What's my best service? Your brain will then chew on that and you will elevate. It literally activates different circuits in the brain, activating the prefrontal cortex. Instead of when we think about problems and what's wrong, we activate the amygdala. We shift the activity in our brain and we elevate. Now you might ask, how do we effectively choreograph that conversations when we actually could offer coaching to others? So how do we do that? And it comes back to Maslow over here. Comes back to Maslow. And when you look at Maslow, the first thing is, when somebody is very stressed out and they're coming to you in a safety frame, the demands have outstripped the resources to engage. And so your goal is to help them come back online. And the first thing to do, and I can't overemphasize this when you're working with somebody, is not to rush to try to fix things. That would be a mistake. But to first claim the ground of compassion, claim the ground of love and belonging by listening to somebody with heartfelt compassion. Let them tell their story. And as somebody tells their story, particularly as you're listening with compassion, with care and compassion, where you're affirming their suffering, saying, I really understand this is hard for you. Listening with that, as somebody tells their story, you give them the gift of telling the story for a few minutes. They're no longer in their story, they're above their story, so they're getting perspective as well. And once you've claimed the ground of belonging here, then I pivot here to asking well-structured questions that can help you elevate to an area of purpose, the activation of purpose? And those questions, would it be helpful, Rio, if we go through some of those questions?
It really does, Danny. And if I could bring some specific questions, and one of them called my attention. The question was, and it came with context. It says, I see some relationship between our human capacity to be vulnerable, which seems to have to do with our ability to receive, and the way in which our businesses are also structured to be error-proof.
Yeah.
How to put the concept of vulnerability to the business context that comes from Plato. And can I add one specific point?
Yes.
What to do when, and because a lot of people are asking that, so I'd like to integrate. What to do specifically when you feel like you have no control, when your leader is being very reactive and you just feel like you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. So first of all, as best you can, there are two questions over here. One of which is a question of authenticity. And when you look at ultimately, the foundation of what it means to elevate humanity, perfectionism is really an undertow. Perfectionism puts you into a place of fight, flight, and a lot of internal criticism, whereas excellence can help you rise. And I will say, I felt very vulnerable at the beginning of this call, particularly when we had all of this, our technology wasn't perfect, right? And we had a role with it. And so at that point, there was a demand and a resource. And if I had kind of spiraled out, I would have gone deep into fight, flight, safety and gone into an anxiety attack. And so part of this work is to actually know and trust that people understand that challenges happen. People understand that unforeseen things happen, and if you're open to that, they will give you a tremendous amount of leeway. And if anything, it makes things more human. And a lot of what we're doing over here, with conscious capitalism, it's talking about how do we move from a machine metaphor, which is, businesses oftentimes operate as a machine to try drive productivity, and at best, and the machine has to run perfectly. And at best, you get a little bit of extra productivity. At worst, people are cogs in the machine, they get crushed, versus understanding that no, a business is more like a human living, breathing network where people have emotions, they have rawness, we make mistakes, we have vulnerabilities, and that's, how do we accommodate for the humanity of this? And that's such an important part of actually the work that we're doing right now, which is to be open and authentic. The next question that you asked, which was a great question, which is, what do you do when your boss is being, challenging? The first one is to be mindful not to feed the reactivity. And the answer is, how do you approach this with compassion? So there's yin compassion and yang compassion. The yin compassion is, how do you take care of yourself? In terms of soothing yourself, in terms of validating yourself, and not taking on the nasty things that may be said to you, but really kind of comforting yourself with that. And then there's a yang form of compassion, which may be to actually say no. And maybe if somebody's abusing you, to step out of the situation and to actually then find the courage to have a crucial conversation. And sometimes those crucial conversations can actually create openings. By extension, there's another way. I would say, let's say that the more common thing that you have is you have a team that's going into some kind of a dysfunction. The team is struggling, and it's not that, it's not that anybody's being nasty, but the team is struggling. So and let's say the team is struggling. I'm going to go into this. There are some crucial questions that come out of the world of appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is an incredibly powerful tool, which are questions that help elevate. So let's say your team is in chaos, there's a lot of reactivity, people are complaining, and blaming, and your ability to actually pause, and it's because leadership is an act of influence, whether you are the leader or you're an individual contributor, everybody has influence on the culture. So your ability to actually introduce mindful questions that elevate a group are incredibly powerful. And so these are 6 foundational questions of appreciative inquiry that can really help elevate and transform a conversation in a group that's feeling dysfunction. Or even if it's one-on-one, even with your difficult leader, if you get the opening to say, you know, I can appreciate your frustration, and beginning to actually then entering this first question, which is discovering purpose, which is, you know, as difficult as this all is, what are the outcomes that matter most and why right now? What are the outcomes that matter most to us? So you're going from a problem frame, like what's wrong with other people, to, difficult moment. What are the outcomes that matter most? You're actually now orient into purpose. And then you're activating strengths by saying something like, okay, those outcomes are, you know, those are important outcomes. And I want to align with that. Well, where have we been most successful with that in the past? So you're activating and assuming strengths, and you're enlivening strengths. And then you have to say, well, what does that reveal right now about the strengths we have, the current strengths we have? And then based on that, if our strengths were flourishing, what would be our vision for success? 3 months, 6 months from now, what would be our vision for success? And then you go into touching down, getting very pragmatic in viewing this vision of success. What would be the specific strategies that will best enable our success? And then what action steps will we take to achieve this? So in short, you know, I know that we're covering a lot of content, and I know you're recording this, and that you will have an opportunity to go back. And maybe if you want to listen to this last part again, so you can actually look more deeply at these questions, and you can modify these questions. There's a lot of art in coaching in terms of how you listen with empathy, and then you strategically, mindfully choreograph questions one-on-one or with your entire company as a whole. There are things where we run appreciative inquiry summits with literally 1,000 people in the room, where we can elevate around all of these questions that can help us effectively shift from that state of reactivity to now a state of creativity, really entering the individual and collective creative mindset that aligns with high performance conscious leadership.
That is beautiful, Daniel. I can imagine that in that specific slide, there were a lot of screenshots, because that can be very useful. And I still remember when you recommended me a book which is called Conversations Worth Having.
Yes.
And it was very interesting to see. And there's one thing that you specifically said that's very important, when you said you have to remember not to feed the reactivity, because sometimes that's what we do, right? It's like we are pouring gas into a bonfire or something. And to understand that, I think it's very, very interesting. There is one question here that it can also start to lead us to the conclusion, from Juliano, and he asked, what do you think will change in our personal behaviors and social behaviors after the crisis? What is the opportunity we are facing here?
What a beautiful question. What a beautiful question. And by the way, you know, what we've just gone in appreciative inquiry. Let me come back over here, and I want to answer it. If you come back and you look at those questions, you know, that's a very, very purposeful question. And so I want to kind of thread into that, because if you look at appreciative inquiry, it's looking at the best of what was, is, and could be. And this threading together. So in terms of looking at what was, we can begin to anchor in very recent times. And I'm going to invite you each to consider 3 questions. consider 3 questions right now. First question is looking at what's been successful in the past, the recent past. Where have you seen humanity at its best over the last month? Where have you seen examples of humanity at its best over the last month? And what does that reveal about the capacity we have right now? What does that reveal about the capacity we have? So that would be a sub-question of that first, where have we seen humanity at its best right now? And what does that reveal to us, the capacity that we have as humanity? Then the next question, I invite you to reflect on, how are you evolving as a conscious leader right now? How are you evolving as a conscious leader right now? And if we all commit to that question collectively, and there are hundreds of you that have joined this call, if we all engage in that question, how we're evolving our conscious leadership, and we're willing to engage in community conversations about our commitment to doing so, then we have a tipping point, because we have a tipping point of leaders that will change the world. And then we can ask the final question, which is, what is our hope that can emerge through all of this? What is my greatest hope for me in the way I can elevate myself? What is the greatest hope for my organization in terms of the change that they can create? And what is the possibility for how the world can change? What is the possibility? And here's why this is so important. We're at a time of choice right now. We're at a time of choice. If we choose not to invest in our growth at this period of time, what can happen is we land up coming out of this just having survived it. And there's a lot of change that will actually remain after we go back. I mean, there was a time, for example, here in the United States after 9/11, where there was such goodwill, that there was an outpouring of goodwill around September 11th. And then we went back to baseline. So what's going to change right now? And if we don't invest in the change, actually we set ourselves up for some kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, because 5 years from now, let's say another crisis hits, we will remember what we went through now and we just survived it, and we will actually have a flashback and we'll say, oh, this is bad. I don't know if I can survive this again. And we'll actually kind of we'll go into that reactive mode, and we can actually incite that reactivity around us. But if we invest in leadership growth and strengthen our capacity to take care of ourselves, our loved ones, our colleagues, our clients, and our communities at large, we will grow stronger within the relationship, within ourselves, with our communities, and we will grow strength and resilience, so we don't leave this experience now with post-traumatic stress. We leave this time with post-traumatic growth. And here's the beautiful thing. When we come back and ask that second question, where have we been successful with this in the past? When we're asking that question 5 years from now, we will remember the time of coronavirus and say something like, if I could get through this, if we could get through this, we can get through anything. So the work that we're doing right now is essentially immunizing or inoculating us against future challenges. And so our ability to actually maintain the beautiful lessons now and the outpouring of humanity will endure with the sufficient commitment of conscious leaders that are coming together to do this inner work right now, to do this work of commitment to accelerating the movement of conscious capitalism and the related movements around it, so that collectively we're elevating humanity together in a sustainable way.
I think that's the precise kind of message everybody was hoping to hear when we talk about leadership, because you told me once that leadership is not about core competences or anything like that, or anything that is like very by the book, but leadership is an act of influence. And I still remember when you said, but we cannot not influence people.
Yes.
And so we cannot not lead people. And in times like these, to understand the influence we can have from staying home to doing something that can bring everybody together aboard on this transition, I think can be very important. And Danny,
can I just amplify something you're saying, because what you're saying is so beautiful. I just really want to affirm and emphasize when you say that actually you cannot not influence somebody because we're wired to connect. What that means, what we're saying is that actually when we're thinking about leadership influence, and because we cannot not be influential, the key question we have to ask ourselves is, are we having positive influence in the environment or negative influence in the environment? And with that, conscious leadership development is essentially this. It's not an act of becoming a leader because everybody already has influence. It's essentially what it is. It's an awakening to the leader we already are. And I think as painful as coronavirus time is, what it's doing is it's creating intense disruption, which provides the gift for awakening, where we can awaken to the leader that we commit to be.
Then it's very interesting that in many webinars that we do, we usually have a lot of questions, and that is the case here, okay? But I have to tell you that I have never seen anybody like that in terms of appreciation. You have no idea of how many people use the asking square just to say how much they appreciate this kind of message right now, and where it hits us, because it hits us right in the heart, and I think that's probably what we need to activate the most right now. So before we make the closure, I would like to ask you, I don't even know how to ask that, but a final message or anything like that in terms of conscious leadership, and how could we sum up a little bit of what we have lived here in this last hour?
What I feel called and moved to is just to close on appreciation, close on deep appreciation. And first of all, I want to appreciate you, Rio, and the extraordinary team of UNGA, the broad team of UNGA, for really embodying conscious leadership. And all of the sponsoring organizations, Conscious Capitalism Latin America with Dario, and many of the other, sponsoring organizations. It is this incredible community. What I take as from the appreciation given, I give it all over, because my deepest source, of inspiration is just being in service of something larger myself. And I think that for me, that's a world of God and spirit. And I just feel that there is such a collective spirit over here. The fact that there is appreciation, that there's a resonance, it gives me such incredible hope and appreciation of what we can all do together. And I just feel so incredibly humbled and blessed to have been able to spend this meaningful time here with each of you attending. And just, I want to express my deep love and appreciation for each and every one of you, and may you find your deepest source of strength to elevate yourself and take deep care of yourself, take deep care of your loved ones, take deep care of your community, so we can all, be in community of, this grand mission of, seeking to elevate humanity together.
Thank you, Danny. We don't have the words to say how much we appreciate it, and I think for everybody that's online here with us today, everything that's been done here and everything that was said by Danny for us was just a mean to present the world with some new forms of not only leading but also living. And Danny, this 1 hour that you invested here with these almost 700 people that were following us here tonight, I know that each one of them are going to wrap it up, bring it home. Actually, they're already home, so
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people are going to be impacted by what you said indirectly, and this is the kind of influence that you have taught us all this time through. So I thank you so much. And once again, everybody, if I could recommend one book and one book only for this moment that we are living, you can look in Amazon, Leading Well from Within by Dr. Daniel Friedland. And I think the energy of the book. And I think that if somehow we can go through this without leaving anyone behind and understanding the potential that conscious leadership can have in relationships, in organizations, in our society, in our economy, I have to say that, Danny, much of that is going to be your legacy. So thank you so much for that. And I'll go to the final announcements that we have to do here. So I'll reshare my screen. Just one sec. Oh, where am I? All right. Okay, let me just put in presentation mode. Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Danny, can you see my screen?
It's blank right now. Yeah.
Oh, I think it's loading. Okay. This is okay, there we go, right? Okay. So I'll kindly ask you to go back to Portuguese again. Is that right?
Of course, yes.
Okay, thank you. Bom, pessoal, a gente vai terminando aqui esse nosso webinar. Eu queria, né, agradecer, acho que em especial, né, não só ao Danny aí que investiu esse tempo com a gente, mas agradecer a todo o esforço que a gente e que algumas pessoas em específico estão tendo para fazer isso acontecer. E por ter sido uma fala em inglês, eu queria agradecer muito a Jade, que é do time do Anga, que fez essa tradução maravilhosa. Quero agradecer em especial a Tayane e o Odilar, que estão fazendo a tradução em Libras, e assim, né, se tiver uma pessoa que precise disso, a gente vai sempre fazer, né? Acho que a gente não quer, de fato, deixar ninguém para trás. Pedir mais uma vez, né, para quem puder e quiser colaborar com as doações para o Espalhe Cestas. Acho que num momento como esse vai ser muito especial, muito mesmo, né? É uma doação sua que vai fazer uma família inteira se alimentar por mais um mês, né? E tudo isso que a gente está vivendo. E eu queria fazer alguns outros convites também. O Capitalismo Consciente, que é co-realizador do ALMA, está com um presente, e eu não vou falar qual é, mas eu só vou dizer que ele é muito especial e tem muito a ver com o movimento que a gente está criando e com a comunidade que está sendo criada, mesmo cada um da sua casa, né? A gente sabe que a gente está cada vez mais conectado, então eu peço para que vocês simplesmente abram esse link ou esse QR Code e vocês vão ver o que é. Também convido todo mundo a conhecer mais a Humanizadas, uma pesquisa que tem sido feita no Brasil desde o ano passado para reconhecer as empresas mais humanizadas do Brasil e entender o que elas podem fazer para serem ainda mais diversas, inclusivas, com uma cultura de fato orientada a todo mundo que se interessa por aquela empresa, né? E, por último, não menos importante, convidar para amanhã. A gente tem também um dia super especial. A gente começa o dia com uma pessoa que a gente admira muito também, que é o Peter Senge, com uma fala super interessante. Quem já leu Peter Senge vai saber o que eu estou falando. Quem não leu, dá um Google que vai entender já já. Na parte da tarde, a gente tem a participação da Cláudia Passos e do José Pacheco, falando sobre novas construções sociais de aprendizagem, falando sobre educação num nível muito elevado. Então, quem tiver algum interesse em educação, essa é a recomendação. E a gente termina o dia falando sobre justiça financeira, sobre redução das desigualdades e o cooperativismo de crédito no meio disso tudo, com o Marco Aurélio Almada, presidente do Cicobi, e com o Rodrigo Caetano da Exame, fazendo a entrevista. De resto, quem quiser ainda seguir e se inscrever, bit.ly/Festival Alma, Alma em maiúsculo, as programações ainda estão lá, você pode se inscrever. Se quiser acompanhar um pouco mais da cobertura de todo o festival, as mídias do Grupo ainda estão à disposição para isso. Se você estiver postando qualquer coisa do festival agora, #Festival Alma, para que esse movimento ganhe ainda mais vozes e que ele ganhe ainda mais pessoas junto com a gente nisso tudo. Até de fato, né, como a gente sempre diz, que um dia capitalismo consciente seja chamado só de capitalismo, que negócios sociais sejam chamados só de negócios, que líderes conscientes sejam chamados e chamadas só de líderes, né? Então a gente vai terminando aqui essa é a nossa sessão. Danny, once again, thank you so much for everything that you did for us today. I know that you have a lot of requests on many webinars, and I hope the world is open to your message. Gente, obrigado, boa noite, e a gente se vê no Festival Alma amanhã.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And just wishing you all love, and please stay safe, well, and just all the best of your health and well-being.
Thank you, Dani. Obrigado, gente. Boa noite.